What's up, hockey fans? Welcome to the Wraparound, brought to you by the Hockey News. I am your host, Emma Lingan, and I'm joined today by Michael Augello and Kelsey Surmacz of the Hockey News, coming at you to talk about all of the latest and greatest storylines from around the NHL in bite-sized portions. But before we do, I want to remind you all that for over 75 years, the Hockey News has been the ultimate hockey fix. Now get 12 issues delivered straight to you, packed with stories, stats, and a bonus gift issue to kick things off. Head over to thn.com to get in on the action. All right. Hope everyone's feeling good, feeling warm. If you were in the crossfires of the winter storm that blew through the U.S. and part of Canada, hope everyone is doing well. Going to get right into some hockey, though. We got to talk about Evan Bouchard. Recorded his first career hat trick, finished with 6 points in the Oilers' 6-5 win in overtime over the Washington Capitals on Saturday. So Bouchard, of course, became just the 4th defenseman in NHL history to notch 3 goals and 3 assists in a game. Mike, do you think this performance puts Bouchard on the short list to join Team Canada for the Olympics in the event that there is an injury?
He's on the list, but I don't know if he would be on the short list. It would depend on who got injured. If it was Cale Makar, then I think they would call on Bouchard because then they would need a power play quarterback. He has as many points. I think he has actually one more power play point than Makar. He's got one less goal than Makar. But we know Evan Bouchard. We know him very well from the last 2 Stanley Cup finals. He's a defensive liability. He's a double-edged sword. I mean, Team USA is rooting for Evan Bouchard to be on Team Canada. Now, if it's somebody, and honestly, if Makar got hurt, I think the player who would get selected before Bouchard would be Jacob Chychrun. Because he has 18 goals and he's had a very good year and he's less of a defensive liability. If it's somebody like Devin Taves who's injured right now and, there's some question they think he'll be back for the Olympics, then it might be somebody else. But I think Bouchard is sort of way down, not way down on the list, but far enough down that I don't think he'll get selected.
Well, Kelsey, I'll ask what you think. I feel like Mike makes a good point here. We've seen this a little bit with Team USA already, and it depends on who gets injured. We saw obviously with Seth Jones going down with an injury, and Team USA called on Jackson Lacombe. A lot of people were wondering why it wasn't Lane Hudson, and it's just has a lot to do with the type of player, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. And I completely agree with Mike that it would depend on who the injury is. Because, again, obviously, if it's a Cale Makar, you need someone pushing offense from the blue line. It's hard to ignore a guy who has 55 points in 53 games, like Evan Bouchard. So he can provide that for sure. But, I mean, you're looking at this roster, and if it is somebody like a Sanheim or a Theodore or somebody like that, I think this is a situation where you're going to see somebody maybe like Chychrun, somebody a little bit more defensively responsible, who can kind of play both sides of the puck. So I do think this is definitely, like Team USA, is a very injury-dependent situation. But he would be on the short list for me. I kind of divert a little bit there. Him, Matthew Schaefer, a couple other guys, Chychrun. But, I mean, again, it all depends on who would get injured, what the situation would be. I agree with Mike there. But for me, he's on the short list, especially if an offensive defenseman gets injured.
Well, of course, got the Olympics coming up in just a couple of weeks here. And before then, of course, the talk of the NHL has been sort of the second trade deadline unofficially that has come as a result of this Olympic break. So Elliotte Friedman actually said on his 32 Thoughts podcast earlier this week that the Minnesota Wild might be open to moving Jesper Wallstedt to bolster other areas of their roster. So Friedman also suggested that the Wild have actually tried moving him before. So in his rookie season, he posted a 12-5-4 record over 21 starts with a 2.7 goals against average, .914 save percentage, along with 4 shutouts. He's 23 years old, drafted 20th overall by the Wild in 2021, currently on a 2-year, $4.4 million contract. So pretty attractive as a trade chip, I think, if they were going to make him available. Mike, considering that the Wild obviously have Philip Gustafsson as well, do you think Wallstedt makes sense as a possible trade piece for Minnesota, and what are some teams that would be interested in him?
Well, I think it makes sense. I mean, Bill Guerin's sort of playing three-dimensional chess here where, I mean, he's traded a bunch of assets in the deal to get Quinn Hughes, short of trading Daniel Yurov. The next most attractive piece is Wallstedt, and he has Gustafsson locked up on a long-term extension until 2031, and he's a restricted free agent after next season. And based on the year he's having, he's going to cost him probably as much or more than what Gustafsson's making. So he's looking ahead and saying, okay, I may as well use him as an asset. I mean, it might be similar to the deal that was made last year where Florida traded Spencer Knight, who was supposed to be their goalie of the future, and they got Seth Jones, and Seth Jones was a key to them winning the Stanley Cup. Teams that would be interested in, I mean, the first one that just screams out loud is Montreal. I mean, Montreal's got Jacob Fowler and maybe a deal involving Wallstedt because he would be an immediate guy who you could plug into the NHL, would maybe have Fowler coming back, although they really like him as a prospect, but he's clearly not ready to be in the NHL right now. They need to improve over Samuel Montembeault and Jakub Dobish. So that would make sense. The other team in the West may be Los Angeles. I mean, Darcy Kemper is even though he made the Olympic team, Darcy Kemper is getting a little long in the tooth, and they really have no goalie that I think Carter George is part of their organization. But other than that, I don't know if they have a goalie of the future that's within a year or two. So, Wallstedt is an NHL prospect or NHL product right now that could step in. So I think LA would be a possibly good destination for him.
Kelsey, any other teams stick out to you as possible landing spots here if the Wild do decide to trade Wallstedt?
Yeah, I do agree with LA in the West for Mike. Obviously, I'm always thinking goaltending for the Edmonton Oilers, but I think they're kind of stuck in their situation. Regardless, they kind of made their goaltender trade already this year when they acquired Tristan Jarry from the Pittsburgh Penguins. But, out east, I think it's kind of interesting because I think there are several teams kind of in this weird middle ground because the East is just so close standings-wise, and there are some teams that might make a push for the playoffs we don't necessarily expect. And one of those teams is the Columbus Blue Jackets for me. For me, I think they could still use an upgrade over Merzlikins and Greaves. They do have some of the assets to potentially make it work, but in terms of the roster, the only problem is I'm not really sure, who on that roster would go the other way or who they would be willing to part with aside from maybe Boone Jenner, but Boone Jenner doesn't want to leave Columbus. So I would think Columbus. I agree with Montreal as well. I think they could definitely use an upgrade over Sam Montembeault. But in general, I do think from the Wild's perspective, too, it is a little bit of a risk, regardless of how you look at this, because they have a tandem that's generally working for them right now. And this is a team that's, kind of been a really good team the whole year. And like I said, this tandem's been producing good results for them. So I think they need to be careful with whatever they decide to do in terms of trading him. But I think the option is on the table, and I'm looking out east if he does go anywhere, because I think there's a lot of teams that could use a little bit of a boost in that.
Well, you mentioned Minnesota. They've been a really strong team all year. The West, in as well as the East, has been very competitive most of the year here. One of the teams in the West, of course, that was an early favorite to make a deep playoff push is the Vegas Golden Knights. So we got to talk about Mark Stone here. He has put together the longest point streak in Vegas Golden Knights history. 12 goals and 23 points in a 14-game span. Now, granted, history is relative here. Pretty young team, the Golden Knights, but impressive nonetheless. Only Brock Nelson has scored more goals than Stone since the streak started on December 29th, and only Nathan MacKinnon and Nikita Kucherov have put up more points. So pretty good company to be in there. Stone is also on pace currently to put up 101 points this year, despite the fact that he's already missed 16 games with an injury, which we know is definitely an occupational hazard of having Mark Stone on your team, is him missing some time with injury. Considering that injury history and the fact that he's 33 years old, Mike, how impressive has this season been for Stone? Do you think he reaches 100 points without potentially getting injured again before Vegas tries to make another playoff push?
He's been extremely impressive. I mean, we know the laundry list of injuries that he's had over the years. Some people who are conspiracy theorists think that they've manipulated LTIR. So, but this year, I mean, it was clearly that he had an injury, and it's clear that he's been a dominating force in the games that he's played. I mean, I saw him on Friday night, basically. Him and Jack Eichel carried the Vegas Golden Knights on their back because good old buddy Mitch Marner didn't do anything in his return to Toronto. I don't know whether he's going to get 100 points. I would think that Vegas may, down the stretch, want to give him a little bit of rest because he is going to the Olympics and he is going to be part of that Team Canada team and not just like a support player. He's going to be a top 6 guy on that team. So, it does help to play the Maple Leafs. Brock Nelson had a hat trick against them and Mark Stone had 2 goals against them. So as long as you play the blue and white, you have a chance to have a long point streak and lead the league in goals in a certain time period.
Well, Kelsey, what do you make of this season for Mark Stone? Obviously very impressive, but how much do you think the Golden Knights' success hinges on him being healthy?
Well, I think a lot of their success hinges on him being healthy. And we kind of think we talked about this last time I was on there. I think some of their forward depth, I don't want to say is a little thin, but losing a potential 100-point player is bad for any team. Ask the Toronto Maple Leafs. They lost Mitch Marner. They're feeling the effects of that. So, I don't think any loss would be easy for Vegas, especially not Stone. But in terms of his season, I think this guy's been underrated for a really long time in terms of both his two-way play and just as a player in general. What he's doing right now is impressive at 33 years old, especially given his injury history. And it really is a shame that he has such an extensive injury history, because I think we'd be talking a lot differently about Stone had it not been for his injury history. So I'm very impressed by his season. I'm not sure he's going to hit 100 points. I think he's bound to cool off here at some point, but you never know. Never say never. I think he's quite a player.
Definitely. And as the saying goes, you need your stars to be your stars. You need the big guys to be the big guys. And Mark Stone has been that for Vegas this year. Unfortunately, the Islanders' stars have not been their stars this year, as Mike well knows. In the Islanders' 5-0 loss to the Buffalo Sabres on Sunday, Islanders head coach Patrick Waugh didn't play the top line of Anthony Duclair, Matt Barzal, and Anders Lee throughout the entire third period. So after the game, Waugh said, "The standard here is to win. I hope it sends a message to the team because I think Barzal's a leader on this team. Unfortunately for Anders, he was on that line. Sometimes you got to take it for the team. I have nothing negative to say about him." So pretty pointed message there. Barzal currently leads the team in scoring with 41 points in 50 games. Also leads all forwards on the team in average ice time, playing more than 21 minutes a game. So Mike, from your perspective, what do you think about Waugh's comments? It was pretty clear he was calling out Barzal, and looking at his stat sheet, for the season. Do you think this is going to have an impact beyond one game?
I think he's trying to light a fire under his team. It's been a long story over years, going back to Lou Lamoriello as general manager with the Islanders, that their one problem has been scoring, and it continues to be a problem. Matthew Schaefer has been a revelation as an 18-year-old defenseman, and he's second on this team in scoring. Barzal is a very good player. Bo Horvat is injured, but the depth of offense is just simply not there, and it's a miracle. The only reason they're in a playoff spot right now is because they're in the Metro Division. If they were in the Atlantic, they would be 4 or 5 points out of a playoff spot. So I think he's trying to light a fire. Maybe he's sending subtle signals to Matthew Darche to get me some help, because right now I think if they can't score, no matter how good Ilya Sorokin is, they're not going to make the playoffs.
Kelsey, do you agree?
I agree somewhat, because I do think, there are big issues not being able to score. When your top producing guy has 11 goals and 41 points on the season, that doesn't say much about the offensive attack that your team has. I do think maybe perhaps in Barzal's particular case, this could be a commentary more on the defensive side for him. That's just speculation, obviously, but that would be my guess here as to why he was called out specifically. But, anything other than that, I almost think it's unfair to put Barzal in a position like that, given the fact that, as Mike said, him and Schaefer are carrying the offense on this team. It's been like that all season. It's kind of unfair to ask any more of him than what he's been giving, because, to be honest, I don't think Matt Barzal, Matt Barzal, not that he's not capable of producing more than he has this season, but this is right on par about with career numbers, not in terms of goals, but just production. So, I think asking more of him offensively is maybe a bit unfair, and maybe something that just isn't cut out for him. So I agree. I mean, I think this should be more a commentary and a move to call it the whole offense and not just one guy.
Yeah, well, we see it a lot. Coaches talking to their players through the media. So we'll see if this has an impact on more than one game. Of course, one guy who has been doing quite a bit for his team in terms of production is Zach Werenski in Columbus. He's been on an absolute tear this season. He's leading defenseman in goals with 19. He's sitting just 1 point behind Cale Makar for the lead among defensemen in points, despite playing 3 fewer games than Cale Makar has this season. So it's hard to believe that the Blue Jackets would be anywhere near the playoff conversation without Werenski in the lineup. And, of course, he finished as a finalist for the Norris Trophy last year. Given his production, do you think, Mike, that Werenski should be the favorite to win the Norris right now?
He won't be the favorite. He'll be a finalist again. I mean, the favorite is Makar. It always is Makar, and Hughes will be in there, and there are a few other defensemen, maybe Chychrun, because I think Chychrun is leading all defensemen with 18 goals. I mean, he's having a phenomenal offensive year, and he's going to be a big part of Team USA at the Olympics. But I mean, the problem here is he's leading the Blue Jackets in scoring by 12 points. I mean, again, this is another team, and it's a little different than the Islanders. The Blue Jackets, unfortunately, with the tragedy that happened to Johnny Gaudreau, they were relying on him to be a big part of their offense and sort of bridge the gap between the young players that they have, like Adam Fantilli and Kent Johnson, and provide that veteran leadership. They're obviously missing that, and I think Werenski's doing his best. But they simply are not developed enough in the other areas to compete for a playoff spot, and they're still within range. I mean, they're within that group of 4 or 5 teams that could conceivably have a good span of time and get back into the playoff race. But it's going to be tough for them to do that with just Werenski, and Werenski leading the team in scoring right now.
Kelsey, you agree?
Yeah, I agree in terms of the playoff push, and that's why I said earlier, just with the caveat and the goaltending, it kind of depends on what their goals are. It seems like they're still trying to make a push, but in terms of Werenski being a candidate for the Norris, it's kind of a shame that he hasn't won it up to this point, because I do think he has been a pretty not underrated defenseman throughout his career, but he's just come so close so many times, and he's always kind of on the periphery. And unfortunately for him, Cale Makar exists. And I do think, in terms of, even if you're looking at that matchup, because they are the 2 leading scorers as far as defensemen in hockey. Makar has 56 points, Werenski has 55. So they're neck and neck there, but Makar is also world's better defensively. That's not a knock on Werenski at all. I just think that is a testament to how good of an all-around defenseman Makar is. I think anytime Makar is healthy and he's putting up seasons like this, it's hard to argue against him getting that Norris nod. But I do think, Werenski probably should get one eventually, but it would probably have to be in a season where he doesn't have to worry so much about Cale Makar.
It's Makar's world. We're all just living in it in terms of defensemen in the NHL. But still, Werenski, fantastic season so far for him. Another guy who's having a fantastic season, Kelsey, is Evgeni Malkin in Pittsburgh. Incredible year with the Penguins. He's producing over a point per game at that pace for the first time in 3 seasons, despite the fact that he is 37 years old. So in a post-game scrum after the Penguins 6-2 win over the Oilers, Malkin was talking about his production, and then he talked about his future, of course. He said, I want one more year. I want to show I'm still a good player. I want everybody to see I can play next year. It's my goal right now. So that's been the big elephant in the room. He is in the final season of his 4-year contract, which carries a $6.1 million cap hit. Kelsey, just from your point of view, what's been different for Malkin this year? Do you think it's that looming question of his contract? Do you think he can maintain this level of production? And what are your predictions, if you have any, in terms of, what his future with the Penguins could be?
I think just in terms of, you're talking about what's different for Malkin this season. And honestly, I think it's because of that prove it mindset. And this isn't something that only extends to Malkin. There are other guys in this roster. You think Anthony Mantha, Stuart Skinner, you got Sidney Crosby even to a certain extent, proving that the Penguins can still push for the playoffs. And they're doing that. They haven't disappointed in that regard. I think Malkin's in that cohort of players that just have something to prove. And it's actually pretty amazing what that can do for a player sometimes, because he is 39 years old. You mentioned he hasn't been point per game since the 2022-2023 season, and this is kind of a renaissance season for him. I think that's a big part of it, is just that prove it mindset for him and the team. I also think his positional versatility has helped quite a lot this year, because they're kind of maximizing what they can get out of him playing on the wing, which is where he's been since he's returned from injury. And the Penguins are doing quite well in that stretch too. So I think, if we're talking about his future, I don't think there's any hurt in the Penguins giving him, 1-year extensions until he decides to hang him up, because Malkin, like Crosby, has made it clear that he wants to remain in Pittsburgh. And I think if he does extend, it's not going to be anywhere else but Pittsburgh. So I think, especially because Malkin has shifted to the wing in recent games and because he's doing well there, it's a little bit less daunting for the Penguins to give him an extension, because they can work him into the lineup in different ways. They don't have to worry about him, taking a second line center spot from somebody like Ben Kindle in the future, or he's not really blocking anybody in that sense. So I think it doesn't hurt for them to bring him back if he's going to be this productive. And even if he's not this productive next season, you slide him down to the third wing, and he's probably one of the better third line wingers in the league. So I don't see an issue with the Penguins extending Malkin. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think he's going to get a 1-year extension here, but we'll see.
Mike, do you think that's the most likely case with Malkin in Pittsburgh? And just what do you make in general of the season he's had so far?
Well, those who doubt Evgeni Malkin do so at their own peril. He's a Hall of Famer. He's, been a great player for the balance of his career. I think a lot of people, and myself included, looked at the Penguins going into the season and said, March the 6th rolls around and Kyle Dubas is going to be, I hope he has the frequent minutes plan from one of the carriers, because he's going to get lots of calls. We may get lots of calls, but they're not going to be selling. They may be buying and selling at the same time. But Malkin is not going to be one of those players, and neither is Crosby, and neither is the Rakels and the Rusts and the Carlsons. It may be flipping a guy like an Anthony Mantha, who's having a good year and getting more assets back. But the Penguins are firmly entrenched in a playoff spot right now, and nobody would have predicted that. They're getting good goaltending. They're scoring a bunch of goals, and Malkin is having a renaissance at age 39. I wish I was that good at 39.
Yeah, don't we all? The Penguins, as you said, having a really strong push for the playoffs, having a really good year so far. Out west, another team that has been making a very, very convincing push here is the Utah Mammoth. They've won 5 games in a row. They're 8-1-1 in their last 10. So that brings them to the top wildcard spot in the Western Conference right now. Of course, a big part of that has been their goaltending. Fantastic goaltending from Karel Vejmelka. He's played a huge part in their success. He leads the league with 25 wins this season, and the team as a whole, mind you, has 27. So he's played in 39 of the team's 51 games. Once you see the numbers for backup Vitek Vanacek, you understand why Vejmelka has had such a heavy workload. Vanacek, rough year, 883 save percentage, 2-9-2 record. Mike, do you think, I mean, obviously Vejmelka's been fantastic. Vanacek, not so much. So when you kind of look at the two as a tandem, do you think the Mammoth have good enough goaltending to be considered for real in the playoff race? Do you think that Vejmelka can sustain this heavy of a workload? I mean, I feel like this is a question we were even asking last year before Utah was a playoff team.
Yeah, if they have genuine hopes of making the playoffs, and I'm sure, their GM Bill Armstrong is going to pursue a goaltender before the deadline. I mean, Vejmelka, you don't want him playing 60 games. You want him to play probably 50 to 55. And Vanacek has not been good since he played for the Devils. He was really good with Washington. He had a couple good years with the Devils. And since then, San Jose, Florida, he was not very good. And Utah this year, he's been a bad number 2. So there are teams out there, there are sellers. There are teams out there that have extra goaltending. Whether they call Buffalo about Colton Ellis, who's a third goaltender, or, Devin Levi or somebody like that, or they call Pittsburgh about Stuart Skinner. I mean, you don't know. I mean, but there are goaltending situations out there where I think they can get a goalie, even on a short term, for a relatively reasonable price. And I think that they will do that.
Kelsey, do you see that happening here? And, any other, what do you think about them maybe looking to add a goaltender at the deadline who could maybe make sense for them?
Yeah, I agree with Mike. This workload isn't sustainable. And granted, I mean, Vanacek has been better in his last 5 or so starts. He had that rough one against Boston before the holiday break. But aside from that, he's been a little bit better. But it's not going to be good enough for Utah if they expect Vejmelka to have the workload that he is currently sustaining. It's just not a sustainable winning strategy for them, and he has been a big part of why they're winning hockey games too. So I do think, if they're serious about contending, which they should be, they're first in the wild card race right now in the West. So I do think they're going to add a goaltender at the deadline. And Mike did mention Pittsburgh. I think that does make some degree of sense because beyond, I don't know if Skinner is going to be the one that moves, though. I would think Shelovs is more likely to move than Skinner because Pittsburgh really likes what it has in Skinner so far. And also, it has a lot of goaltending depth. They have 2 very capable guys in Wilkes-Barre Scranton, their AHL affiliate, and Sergei Murashov and Yoel Blomqvist. And I do think Kyle Dubas is going to kind of be looking for those kind of moves to maybe add to the periphery of his roster. He may be a soft buyer at this deadline. I don't think anything's going to be crazy, but I think that that's a potential situation for Utah to look at because Shelovs has been pretty steady in a backup role. Actually a tandem role for the Penguins this season. Skinner's been getting a few more starts recently, but I do think someone like Shelovs might be able to help them because even if his numbers don't suggest that he's been a very high performer for the Penguins, he does tend to perform really well in big moments and late in games when you really need him to. He kind of has that playoff experience too. So we'll see, but I think potentially Artur Shelovs could be a target for them if the Penguins are looking to buy a little bit.
And Shelovs, very strong playoff history as well. If you don't believe me, just ask the Nashville Predators how Artur Shelovs performs in the playoffs. Of course, had that great run with Vancouver. And like you said, I've been watching Skinner lately thinking, I don't know if the Penguins are going to want to let him go. They might be digging a little bit deeper to deal from their goaltending depth. So could make a lot of sense there. All right, want to wrap things up today talking about Cole Caufield. He had a hat trick, and the Canadiens lost to Boston on Saturday, continuing his career best pace with 29 goals and 53 points in 52 games this season. So Caufield has steadily been increasing his goal production year over year. He's on pace for 45 goals. Considering the Habs are on the rise now and Caufield's just 25 years old, Mike, what do you think his ceiling for goal scoring could be throughout his career?
I think he's going to be a 50 goal scorer. I mean, 45 and 50, that's pretty close. I mean, if you look at his draft class, the 2019 draft class, he's second only to Jack Hughes, and he was selected 15th overall. So that was a mistake that a lot of general managers in this league made, and probably made it because he's smaller of stature. I mean, I remember the 2016 draft in Buffalo when people were saying, oh, don't draft Alex DeBrincat, he's too small. And then he gets taken in the second round by Chicago, and he scored. All he does is score goals. It shouldn't be the frame of the player. It should be the talent of the player. And Cole Caufield is very talented. I do note that the Canadiens put out a U.S. hockey reference when he scored some goals, sort of trolling USA Hockey that this guy should be on the team. Well, Bill Guerin is the general manager, and he likes bigger players, so I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's kind of a, maybe a new rivalry between USA Hockey and the Montreal Canadiens. You got Cole Caufield, you got Lane Hudson. I mean, something's going on there. Kelsey, what do you think of Caufield, the season he's having, and what his ceiling could be in this league?
Yeah, it's funny. Mike actually stole my joke. I was also going to reference USA Hockey because they're clearly allergic to goal scorers, because we're having the same conversation about Jason Robertson, as has been well documented. So I'm really not sure why Caufield isn't on that team in general. But anyway, yes, I think in terms of his ceiling, we could see a few 50-goal seasons from him. I see him more in the 40-goal range regularly, I guess. So, I mean, if we're talking about where he's going to be for most of his career, I'd say the 40-goal range. But I do think we could see a few peak seasons where he goes above 50, potentially even, flirts with 60. I think this is a legitimate goal scorer in the National Hockey League. As Mike said, this is a guy that just has the talent, and he has the talent to sustain this goal scoring ability as well. So I think he's just going to keep getting better and better. It's impressive what he's doing for the Montreal Canadiens. And honestly, shame on Bill Guerin and Team USA, because I think it's a really big miss not having this guy on that roster.
Well, I think maybe if he doesn't quite reach that ceiling, shame on the Montreal Canadiens for not providing him with a little bit more forward depth there. We've talked about it before as them being a very top-heavy team. So in order to maximize his goal-scoring ability, maybe you got to, surround him with some more playmakers. Who knows? But again, if you want to read about the Montreal Canadiens, about any of the teams or players that we've talked about today, head over to the Hockey News. They are the go-to for all things hockey since 1947. 12 issues packed with game and player insights, plus a free issue to start. It's a must-have for any fan. Head to thn.com/free and grab your subscription today. That is going to do it for today's episode of the Wraparound. Thank you so much for everyone who tuned in today and listened to us talking some hockey. We really do appreciate it. We will be back with an all-new episode later this week. For Mike Augello and Kelsey Surmacz, I'm Emma Lingan. This is the Wraparound, and we will see you next time.